Welcome to the Philosophical Odysseys podcast.
It's great to be here.
So what if I told you that thinking of vibrant, like a purple sunset, is beautiful, isn't actually a natural human instinct?
Right, like it's a learned behavior.
Exactly. A learned behavior that our ancestors essentially just invented.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. Like,
Yeah.
What if the awe you feel staring at a massive mountain range is actually just, an artificial template projected from your own mind onto a pile of meaningless rocks?
Yeah, just rocks and dirt.
Right. So today, we are embarking on a mission to figure out what beauty actually means.
Yeah.
And we aren't looking at this as some abstract, floaty idea you might debate at a dinner party.
No, not at all.
We are looking at it as a foundational pillar for how you understand yourself, your community, and just, the universe at large.
And I mean, it is a massive undertaking, but I'd argue there's actually nothing more vital.
Definitely.
We're going to travel today from the ancient sun-drenched temples of Greece all the way to, the bustling centers of modern civil society.
That's quite a journey.
It is. And the purpose of this deep dive is to decode the actual mechanics of awe. We want to know exactly why your brain lights up when you see something truly beautiful.
And more importantly, what that reaction demands of you, right?
Precisely. Because it demands a lot.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to a doctor with a broken arm, there's a comforting precision to it.
Right, you get the x-ray.
Exactly. The x-ray shows a jagged white line on the bone, the doctor points to it, and that's it. It's binary, broken or not broken.
Very clear cut.
But when you step into the world of aesthetics, that diagnostic x-ray machine just completely shatters.
It really does. It's so messy.
It is. We constantly use the words art and beauty interchangeably. We treat them as a luxury, like the frosting on the cake of life.
Right, something you only get to enjoy after all the real work of survival is done.
Exactly. But the ideas we are diving into today argue something incredibly radical. They argue that beauty is an existential necessity.
A biological and social tool.
Yes, a tool for profound change.
And it's the absolute definition of murky waters. I mean, the reason we are so confused about what beauty is today is because we've completely lost the historical thread.
We forgot what it was originally meant to do for us.
Exactly. So if we want to understand this radical premise that beauty is a necessity, not a luxury, we have to untangle the vocabulary.
We have to look at how humanity's relationship with the sensory world actually evolved.
Right, because, it wasn't always neatly packaged into a university department called art and beauty.
Yeah, if we go back to the ancient Greeks, they didn't really have a concept of aesthetics as a standalone thing, did they?
Not at all. For a very long time in human history, thinking about beauty and thinking about art were entirely separate domains.
They weren't mashed together like they are now.
No, not at all. If we look at Platonism, for instance, beauty was viewed as a supreme cosmic reality.
Okay, wait. When you say cosmic reality, you're talking about the theory of forms, right?
Yeah.
The idea that somewhere out there in the ether, there's a perfect mathematical blueprint of a chair, and every physical chair on Earth is just a flawed copy.
Precisely. Plato believed that the physical world we live in, like the things we can touch, smell, and see, is just a shadowy imitation of these pure, eternal ideas.
Right.
And for him, the idea of beauty was one of the highest truths in the entire universe. It was woven into the fabric of existence, into ethics, into math.
So beauty was ultimate reality.
Yes.
But where does art fit into that? I mean, if beauty is the ultimate truth, shouldn't a painter who paints a beautiful person be celebrated as like a truth teller?
You would think so, right. But Plato's logic actually goes in the exact opposite direction.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Plato was deeply suspicious of art. Remember, he believes the physical world is already a copy of the real truth.
Okay.
So if a physical tree is just a flawed copy of the idea of a tree, what is a painting of a tree?
Oh, it's a copy of a copy.
Exactly. It is 2 steps removed from the truth. Art relies on sensory illusion. It tricks the eye. It stirs up all these irrational emotions. Plato saw art as a cheap shadow play.
So it actually drags human consciousness further away from rational truth?
Yes. If you are an artist in Plato's ideal republic, your life's work is basically considered actively deceptive.
That is wild. He basically viewed art the way some people today view, like deep fake videos.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
It's just an illusion designed to manipulate you away from reality.
Exactly. But, humanity didn't stay locked in that anti-art mindset forever.
Right, because Aristotle comes along and slightly pivots the lens, doesn't he?
He does. Aristotle was much more pragmatic. He didn't elevate art to the level of supreme cosmic beauty, but he also didn't condemn it as a deceptive shadow.
So where did he land?
He saw art as a rational, deeply human process. For Aristotle, art was a way for humans to complete what nature had left unfinished.
Oh, that's interesting.
And crucially, he focused on its psychological utility.
The cathartic effect. I find this part so fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, Aristotle looks at Greek tragedy. These plays where the hero makes a terrible mistake, everything falls apart, and everyone dies horribly.
Right.
And he asks, why would anyone want to watch that? And his answer is that it's psychological medicine.
Yes. The mechanics of catharsis. He recognized that by watching a tragic play, the citizens of Athens could experience terror and pity, but in a controlled environment.
Like a safe space to freak out.
Exactly. The art acts as a pressure valve. It purges those negative emotions from the psyche, allowing the citizen to leave the amphitheater feeling, cleansed.
Emotionally regulated. It served a real civic purpose.
It did. But here's the thing. Plato thinks art is a dangerous lie, and Aristotle thinks it's a useful psychological tool.
But neither of them has created an aesthetics department yet.
Right. They're still just debating the utility of making things.
So when do we finally get permission to just look at something and study how it makes us feel?
We have to fast forward a very long way for that. Enter the 18th century.
The Enlightenment.
Yes. The intellectual world is completely obsessed with reason, logic, and mathematics as the only valid ways to understand the universe.
Right, very rigid.
But a philosopher named Alexander Baumgarten realizes there is a massive blind spot.
Because logic can't explain why a piece of music makes you cry.
Exactly. So Baumgarten makes this profound conceptual leap. He coins a brand new term, aesthetics.
Okay, so that's where we get the word.
Yeah. He derives it from the Greek word aesthetikos, which relates to sensory perception. And he defines this new field as the science of sensory knowledge.
The science of sensory knowledge. Honestly, it sounds like an oxymoron.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, science is rigid and sensory knowledge is just vibes.
Well, it was incredibly rebellious for its time. Baumgarten is arguing that sensory experience, like the way we feel, see, and perceive the physical world, has its own internal logic.
So it's not just random chaos in our heads.
Right. It has its own kind of perfection. It doesn't operate on the rigid rules of math or pure reason, but it is an independent, valid space worthy of rigorous philosophical study.
He essentially carves out a new room in the House of Philosophy specifically for human perception.
That's a great way to put it.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But wait, if Baumgarten coins aesthetics to cover all sensory perception, doesn't that mean the field is way broader than just the beautiful?
Oh, absolutely.
Because my senses can perceive a lot of things that aren't pretty.
Right. It covers the entire spectrum of how things strike our consciousness. So the field of aesthetics encompasses the sublime, the tragic, the elegant, the grotesque, and the ugly.
See, this is where my mind snacks.
How so?
If aesthetics covers the ugly and the grotesque too, isn't it unfairly limiting that our culture always defaults to talking about beauty?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like if I walk into a modern art museum and see a painting of a horrific, bloody battle or a sculpture made of twisted, rusted metal, it isn't beautiful.
No, definitely not.
But it is an incredibly profound aesthetic experience. It moves me. So why are we so obsessed with just the beautiful slice of the pie?
It's a brilliant question. In fact, some thinkers after Baumgarten argued that the field should have been named Kalagon, derived from kalos, the Greek word specifically for beautiful.
Oh, just to avoid that exact confusion.
Yeah, but you are entirely correct. Reducing aesthetics to just beauty shrinks human experience.
Totally.
Like, a terrifying 80-foot wave crashing against a cliff is sublime. It makes you feel small and mortal.
Right.
And a distorted, disproportionate mask is grotesque. It makes you feel unsettled. Both are deeply aesthetic.
So why do we always circle back to beauty?
Because beauty remains the most fiercely debated, the most sought after, and frankly, the most socially powerful of all the aesthetic concepts.
It'd have that magnetic pull.
Yes. Sublime might terrify you, the grotesque might unsettle you, but beauty compels you. It draws you in.
I see.
And because it has this pull, it leads us directly to the most contentious question in the history of the field.
Which is?
Where does this beauty actually reside?
The geography of beauty. Is it a physical fact of the universe?
Yeah.
Or is it just a hallucination in our brains?
Exactly. And this debate sets up three main camps, representing totally different ways of viewing reality.
Okay, let's break them down.
The first camp claims that beauty is purely objective. It lives entirely inside the physical object.
And this camp is founded by Pythagoras, the guy who tortured us all in high school geometry.
The very same. Pythagoras looks at the world and says, beauty is just math.
Just math.
Yeah, it is harmony. It's the exact proportions of an object and how the individual parts fit mathematically into the whole.
Like the famous Golden ratio.
Exactly. If the ratio is correct, the object is beautiful. It has absolutely nothing to do with your feelings. It's cold, hard numbers.
Okay, I can see that in architecture, or maybe the spiral of the seashell. But it feels a bit, I don't know, antiquated.
It does feel very rigid.
Do modern philosophers still believe beauty is just a math equation?
Well, they don't use the exact same Pythagorean math, but the objective approach is still very much alive. Yeah, a 20th century philosopher named Sircello updated this idea. He developed a theory based on what he called properties of qualitative degree.
Properties of qualitative degree. Okay, we need to unpack that. How does that actually work in the real world?
So the underlying mechanism is kind of like a volume dial on physical traits. Sircello argued that we don't just see a color, we see the intensity of that color.
Okay.
If an object possesses a naturally high degree of certain qualities, like vividness, purity, brilliance, or clarity, it is objectively beautiful.
Give me an example.
Think of a stained glass window in a cathedral. When the sun hits it, the blue glass isn't just blue. It is an intensely pure, deeply vivid, brilliant blue.
Okay, I picture it.
Sircello argues that the beauty isn't just your opinion. The beauty is a measurable, high-degree property of the light and the glass itself. It exists independently of you.
So if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around, its leaves are still a highly vivid green. Therefore, it's beautiful.
Exactly. It's a physical fact.
It's a comforting thought, honestly, the idea that beauty is a solid physical fact. But, my gut instinct rebels against it.
Why is that?
Well, if beauty is just a high-degree volume dial on vividness, then the brightest, most neon Times Square billboard should be the most beautiful thing on earth. But it's not.
Yeah.
It's a headache.
Yeah.
So there has to be a human element.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the second camp, right? The subjective approach.
Yes. Enter Immanuel Kant. Kant completely upends the board. He fundamentally shifts the geography. For Kant, beauty does not live in the object.
Good.
It cannot be measured with a ruler or a color saturation dial. It lives entirely in the observer. It is a subjective feeling.
So it's all in our heads.
Yes. But, and this is the crucial mechanism of his theory, Kant is very strict about what kind of feeling it is. He defines it as disinterested pleasure.
Disinterested pleasure. I'm going to push back hard on this because it sounds totally contradictory.
It does sound like an oxymoron.
Yeah. How can pleasure be disinterested? If I find something pleasurable, I am inherently interested in it. It feels like Kant is telling me I can enjoy a party, but I'm absolutely not allowed to dance or eat the snacks. How do we separate our desires from what we find beautiful?
Okay, to understand Kant's mechanism here, we have to look at the strict boundary he draws between what is agreeable and what is beautiful.
Agreeable versus beautiful. Got it.
The agreeable is anything that satisfies a personal, physical, or practical desire.
Like eating a massive slice of rich chocolate cake when I'm starving.
Exactly. The cake is highly agreeable. The pleasure you feel while eating it is entirely interested.
Because I want to consume it.
Yes. It serves a biological function for your body. It satisfies an urge. You have a vested practical interest in the existence of that cake.
Okay, so the cake is agreeable, but Kant would say it's not beautiful in the philosophical sense.
Right. Because true beauty, for Kant, triggers a completely different cognitive mechanism. Beauty is a pleasure independent of any practical use or personal desire to possess the object.
So I don't want to consume it.
Right. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a pristine, snow-capped mountain range at dawn.
You don't want to eat the mountain. You don't want to chop it down to build a house. You don't want to put it in your pocket.
Yeah.
You have no practical interest in it whatsoever.
I just stand there in awe.
Yes. What happens in your brain, according to Kant, is a free and harmonious play of your mental faculties.
Wow. Free and harmonious play.
Your imagination and your understanding are stimulated, dancing together without trying to solve a problem or satisfy a hunger. That pure, detached contemplation is disinterested pleasure. That is beauty.
I understand the distinction now. But here is the massive hole in Kant's subjective theory.
Let's hear it.
If beauty is just my internal subjective feeling of free-playing faculties, why do we argue about art and movies so fiercely? right? If I think a movie is a masterpiece and you think it's garbage and beauty is just subjective, I should just shrug and say, cool, different strokes for different folks.
But you don't.
I don't. I get angry. I try to convince you. Why do we do that?
That is the absolute genius of Kant's framework.
Yeah.
He accounts for that exact human behavior.
He does. Yes. He says that even though beauty is a completely subjective feeling, when we experience it, our brain does something strange. We universally expect everyone else to agree with us.
We demand agreement.
We do. When you taste a weird flavor of ice cream and like it, you say, I like this. You accept it's a personal preference.
Right, because it's just agreeable.
Exactly. But when you stand before a breathtaking painting, you don't say, I like this. You say, this painting is beautiful.
Oh, like it's a fact.
Yes. You project your subjective feeling onto the object as if it were an objective fact. You feel as though you have discovered a universal rule, and you are genuinely baffled and sometimes offended if the person next to you doesn't experience the exact same awe.
That is so true. We treat our feelings like universal laws.
We really do.
Okay, so we have Pythagoras and Sircello saying beauty is locked in the math of the object. We have Kant saying it's locked in the detached feeling of the observer. But then there is a third camp.
The relational view.
Yes, and this is the one that completely blew my mind.
Championed by Alexander Nehamas. This is a much more contemporary approach, and it strips away the cold math of Pythagoras and the extreme detachment of Kant.
Nehamas defines beauty as a promise of happiness. I want us to really sit with that phrase, a promise of happiness.
It's beautiful in itself.
It is. He argues that finding something beautiful isn't just about staring at it from a distance. It means hoping your life will be fundamentally deeper or better if that beautiful thing becomes a part of it.
The mechanism here is social and transformative. Nehamas refuses to leave beauty isolated in the object or isolated in the lonely mind of the observer.
He connects it all.
He makes beauty a relational glue between us and the world.
Calling something beautiful is like telling a joke. That's the best analogy I can think of.
Okay, tell me more.
When you tell a joke to a stranger, you're taking a massive risk.
Yeah.
You are putting yourself out there, and you risk awkward silence or rejection.
Right.
But when the other person laughs, you've suddenly bridged the gap between you. You've invited them into a shared emotional space.
That's a perfect analogy.
So Nehamas is saying that when we find a book or a song or another person beautiful, we are making ourselves vulnerable. We are hoping that by engaging with this thing, our worldview will be expanded.
It's an invitation to a community. Kant's beauty is incredibly safe. Disinterested pleasure asks nothing of you. You look at the mountain, feel nice, and go home unchanged.
But Nehamas' beauty is dangerous.
Exactly. It demands that you change your life to accommodate this new, beautiful thing you've discovered. If you hear an album that you find truly beautiful, you don't just listen to it once.
No, you obsess over it.
You share it with your friends, you seek out other people who love it. It alters your trajectory.
But if beauty is this powerful, relational promise of happiness, how do we actually receive that promise?
What do you mean?
Like, do we need to prep our brains for it, or does it just hit us like a freight train?
This brings us to the mechanics of experience. How do we actually approach an aesthetic object in the wild?
Let's get into it.
Philosophers divide our approach into two major opposing strategies: formalism and contextualism.
Okay, let's start with formalism. This is the camp that essentially says, put on your blinders. Ignore the background noise, ignore the history, and just look at what's directly in front of you.
Precisely. Formalism focuses entirely on the structural internal elements of the object: the lines, the colors, the rhythm, the syntax.
Just the raw data.
Yeah. Thinkers like John Dewey emphasize the unity of the work. Does it hold together on its own? Another philosopher, Monroe Beardsley, describes the aesthetic experience as a coherent, dense sensory process. The object must be self-sufficient.
So if I'm a strict formalist looking at a massive, abstract Mark Rothko painting, just, two giant rectangles of red and black, I don't care about Rothko's personal life.
Nope.
I don't care about the artistic movements of the 1950s. I just stand there and let the physical contrast between the red and the black wash over my retinas.
Yes. You maintain what is called an aesthetic distance. The art is a sealed ecosystem.
Got it.
But contextualism, championed by thinkers like Kendall Walton and Arthur Danto, completely rejects this. They argue that maintaining an aesthetic distance is actually blinding yourself. They say you cannot possibly divorce an object from its cultural and historical background.
They say context is king, but how does knowing a trivia fact about a painting actually change the sensory experience of looking at it?
Because your brain uses context as a framing device to process sensory data. Let's use a musical analogy to explain the mechanism.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine you are at a cafe and a song comes on in a language you don't speak. You don't know the artist, you don't know the lyrics.
I have no context.
Exactly. You just hear the upbeat tempo, the catchy melody, and the bright acoustic guitar. It makes you tap your foot.
Wow.
You experience it as a joyful, energetic song. That is a pure formalist experience.
I am engaging only with the structural sound waves.
Right. But now let's introduce contextualism. A friend sitting across from you translates the lyrics.
Sure.
They tell you the heartbreaking backstory. The artist wrote this upbeat melody as a desperate mechanism to cope with the sudden loss of a child. The lyrics are actually a devastating plea for forgiveness.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now listen to the song again. Does it sound the same to you?
Not at all. The exact same acoustic guitar strum now sounds incredibly tragic. The upbeat tempo sounds like desperate denial.
Exactly.
The physical sound waves hitting my eardrum haven't changed, but my brain's conceptual framing of those waves has completely altered the aesthetic reality of the song.
The context fundamentally rewrote your sensory perception. And this raises a fascinating question for you, the listener, to reflect on.
Which way is your brain naturally wired?
Right. When you walk into an art gallery or a historical site, do you immediately walk up to the little white plaque on the wall to read the history and the artist's intent?
Or do you deliberately avoid the plaque so you can just experience the object raw and unpolluted?
Exactly. Which one are you?
I am unashamedly a read the plaque person. I need the story to anchor my eyes. If I don't know the context, I feel like I'm only seeing half the picture.
Which means your knowledge actively directs your perception. But this leads to a secondary, fiercely debated mechanism, the aesthetic attitude. Do we need to consciously shift our brain into a special art viewing mode to experience beauty, or can it happen when we are totally unprepared?
Like, do I have to be in a museum to feel awe?
Right. A philosopher named Eddie Zemak argues against this special attitude. He says you can't just separate your mindset from the practical, physical existence of the object.
Makes sense.
You can't pretend a bowl of fruit is just an aesthetic study of color if you are literally starving. The practical reality of the world doesn't vanish just because you want to be contemplative.
But on the other side of the debate, Alan Goldman argues that you don't always need to prepare your mind at all.
Exactly.
You don't need a plaque, and you don't need a museum. Goldman points out that sometimes you are just walking down a dreary gray city street, completely stressed out, thinking about your electric bill.
And suddenly the beauty of a sunset reflecting off a glass building or the sound of a street musician playing a cello just violently strikes you out of nowhere.
It hijacks your nervous system. You didn't consent to an aesthetic experience, but the beauty forced its way in anyway.
It did. But whether we are prepped by context or hijacked by a sudden sunset, we eventually run into the exact same wall.
Communication.
Yes. How do we actually articulate what we just experienced?
This is the most frustrating part of being human. Have you ever tried to convince a friend that a movie is a masterpiece when they just thought it was boring?
Many times.
You sound like a crazy person. You're waving your hands, yelling about the pacing and the cinematography, and they just shrug. Why is our language so utterly inadequate for explaining beauty to someone who doesn't see it?
Because of a fundamental disconnect between physical facts and aesthetic concepts. To explain why this happens, we need to look at a breakthrough theory from 1959 by a philosopher named Frank Sibley.
Sibley.
Yeah, Sibley cracked the code on why we argue about art. He realized that we use two completely different camps of language and we constantly confuse them.
Okay, what are the two camps?
The first camp is non-aesthetic concepts. These are verifiable physical facts. Anyone with working eyes and ears can perceive them without any special sensitivity.
Oh, what?
The painting contains the color red. The lines curve upward. The music is played at 120 beats per minute. The novel is written in the first person.
It's objective data. You don't need an art degree, and you don't need taste to know that a canvas has red paint on it.
Precisely. But the second camp is aesthetic concepts. These are descriptions that require sensitivity, taste, and interpretation.
Okay.
These are words like elegant, somber, delicate, garish, balanced, or chaotic.
And here is the crux of Sibley's argument, the mechanism that explains why I can't convince my friend the movie is brilliant.
What did he say?
Sibley says that there are absolutely necessary and sufficient physical conditions for aesthetic concepts.
This is a monumental philosophical realization. Let's use a geometry metaphor to explain the mechanism because it clarifies exactly why we get so frustrated.
Geometry again, okay.
Think about geometry. If you have a shape and you can physically verify that it has 4 equal sides and 4 right angles, what is it?
It's a square every single time.
Exactly. Those physical traits, 4 equal sides, 4 right angles, are the necessary and sufficient conditions for a square. If the physical facts are present, the result is guaranteed.
It is mathematically inescapable. You can prove it to anyone.
But Sibley is saying that art and beauty do not work like geometry. Physical features in a painting do not guarantee an aesthetic result.
So you cannot write a mathematical formula for elegance.
No, you can't. Let's take the example of a vase. Imagine a vase that has pale, muted colors, very thin, sweeping curves, and a slender neck.
Right, I'm picturing it.
You look at it and your brain synthesizes those physical facts, and you say, that vase is incredibly elegant.
Okay, so pale colors plus thin curves equals elegance.
But does it? Sibley says no. Because if you take those exact same physical ingredients, pale colors, thin curves, slender neck, and you apply them to a slightly different vase.
Or you place that vase in a heavily cluttered dark room.
Yes. Those exact same physical traits might suddenly make the vase look bland or lifeless or fragile.
The exact same ingredients create a completely different aesthetic flavor.
Yes, because aesthetic qualities are emergent. They emerge holistically from the unique, unrepeatable combination of the physical traits, not just the mere presence of them.
This is a huge relief to me, honestly, because it explains what the role of a critic actually is.
How so?
Well, if you can't mathematically prove that a painting is melancholic by counting the number of blue brushstrokes, then an art critic's job isn't to be a supreme judge handing down a guilty or not guilty verdict.
They cannot be dictators of taste, because logic cannot force someone to feel an aesthetic concept. According to Sibley, a critic's real job is simply pointing or guiding.
They are a tour guide. I love this. A critic is just a tour guide with a flashlight in a dark room.
Exactly.
They can't hand you the feeling of beauty, but they can shine their flashlight on the non-aesthetic physical facts. They can say, hey, look at the contrast between this rough brushstroke here and the smooth canvas over there.
They direct your attention to the physical ingredients, hoping that by looking closely enough, the emergent aesthetic concept, the elegance, or the melancholy, will spark in your own mind.
They're trying to help you see the whole by guiding you through the parts.
But you've hit on the ultimate limitation of human communication here. Arguments over beauty can never be definitively won.
Because if someone simply doesn't perceive the elegance of the vase, you cannot force them to see it by handing them a spreadsheet of its physical measurements.
Right. You cannot logically debate someone into feeling awe.
You can't force them with a spreadsheet. It's so true. And it highlights the deeply human element of this entire field. We need a human mind to frame and interpret these raw physical traits into aesthetic meaning.
Which brings up a massive, daunting question for our deep dive.
Yeah. If art and beauty require a human mind to interpret and frame them, what about nature? What about the universe before we showed up?
This is the battle of the frame versus the infinite. Does independent beauty truly exist in the wild, or does beauty require a human touch to even exist?
Let's start with nature. The thinkers we're looking at point out that nature is spontaneous. It lacks conscious design.
Right.
A sunset over the ocean might be deeply moving. It might lower your blood pressure and give you peace, but it lacks philosophical depth.
Let's unpack the mechanism behind that claim. Why does a sunset lack depth? Because a sunset cannot communicate human tragedy.
It's just gas and light.
Exactly. A mountain cannot express moral contradictions or historical trauma or irony. Nature just is. It is entirely self-contained and indifferent to our existence.
But art is fundamentally artificial, and that artificiality is its superpower.
It is.
One modern thinker, Afsar Timosine, argues that humans are creatures uniquely trapped between the past and the future. We are painfully aware of our own mortality and our own timeline.
And art freezes our temporal existence. It takes a fleeting moment of human history or human grief and gives it a permanent aesthetic form.
Therefore, art has a profound historical and conscious depth that a tree or a rock simply cannot possess.
Which leads us to the most controversial stance in our entire journey today.
Oh boy, let's hear it.
An early 20th century aesthetician named Charles Lello takes this idea to its absolute extreme. Lello argues that nature has absolutely zero aesthetic value on its own.
None. Zero. The Grand Canyon is just a ditch.
He claims that raw nature is just matter and physics. Lalo argues that we only find a landscape beautiful because we have been culturally trained to do so by artists.
Wait, what?
We have spent centuries looking at romantic landscape paintings, reading poetry about dark forests, and studying perfectly framed photographs. We take the artistic templates created by human minds and we project them onto the wild.
So without human art to teach us how to frame the world, nature is aesthetically blank.
That's his argument.
Okay, I have to push back on Lalo here. I get the theory, but isn't it incredibly arrogant of humanity to say we invented the beauty of a mountain just because we painted it?
It is a bold claim.
It feels incredibly anthropocentric. It's like saying the universe was a boring, ugly place until humans showed up with our paintbrushes to fix it. I can't accept that a person who has never seen a painting in their life wouldn't feel awe looking at the night sky.
It is undeniably anthropocentric. But let's test Lalo's theory. If a deadly virus wiped out the entire human race tomorrow and there was not a single conscious mind left on Earth to perceive it,
Okay.
would the Grand Canyon still be beautiful? Or would it just be wind, erosion, and red rocks?
Wow. Okay, if beauty requires a mind to feel it,
Yeah.
then without humans, the beauty vanishes. It just becomes physics again.
Exactly. And the underlying mechanism of Lalo's argument makes more sense when you contrast the aesthetics of the undefined with the concept of the frame.
The idea of boundaries. Explain how this works.
Look at nature. Nature has no strict boundaries. Think of a coastline where the ocean meets the land. A coastline is not a sharp black line drawn with a marker. It is a messy transition zone. The sand mixes with the water, the tide comes in and out, the borders are infinitely blurry and undefined. Nature is an endless, chaotic flow of matter blending into other matter.
But art draws a frame.
Yes. The fundamental act of creating art is the act of imposing a border. A painter takes this infinite, chaotic, undefined flow of reality, puts a square wooden frame around a tiny piece of it and says, "Stop. Look only at this."
And by framing it, you artificially isolate it.
And by isolating it, you intensify the meaning. You make the boundless, overwhelming world digestible for our limited human minds.
By drawing a line around something, we're saying, pay attention to this specifically. Nature gives us the infinite, which is peaceful but completely overwhelming. Art gives us the frame.
Right.
And the frame acts like a mirror. It reflects our own consciousness back to us. We need the frame to understand ourselves.
And that profound transition from the infinite chaos of nature to the framed, meaningful structure of human creation is exactly how humanity builds its world.
Which is why our deep dive must now shift from the canvas of a painting to the physical structures we live in.
Yes. We use frames to capture meaning in art. But what happens when we take this human framing off the canvas and use it to build our actual cities, our architecture, and our social communities?
We are entering the architecture of society. We're going back to ancient Rome.
Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, 1st century BC, the architect who literally wrote the rule book for how human beings should build their world.
Let's talk about his rules.
Vitruvius wrote an incredibly influential treatise called The 10 Books on Architecture. In it, he established 3 mandatory pillars for a successful building. If you are constructing anything, a temple, a house, a bridge, it must possess these 3 qualities: firmitas, utilitas, and venustas.
Okay, let's translate the Latin and break these down. Firmitas means durability or strength. It has to stand up to the wind.
Right.
Utilitas means utility or functionality. It has to actually serve a purpose. And venustas means beauty or aesthetics. It has to delight the eye.
Now, to understand how this applies to our lives today, we can use the metaphor of classical Greek columns to represent these 3 pillars.
Okay.
And we aren't just talking about stone and mortar anymore. We are extrapolating these architectural rules to the very structure of human society.
I love this metaphor so much. It makes invisible social concepts totally concrete. Let's walk through the columns. First, we have the Doric column.
The Doric column is the oldest. It is thick, heavy, and it has no base. It is planted directly into the earth. It is meant to hold up massive weight. It represents unshakable strength for mitas.
Okay, strength.
But socially, what does this column represent in a community? It represents the courage to turn free thought into physical action. It is the raw strength of a society, the will to exist and defend itself.
So society's Doric column is its legal system, its human rights, its physical infrastructure,
Yeah.
the heavy stuff.
Exactly. Then we move to the Ionic column.
The Ionic column.
The Ionic column is more slender. It isn't just a brute force pillar. It has those elegant scroll-like volutes at the top. It represents wisdom and functionality utilitas.
So it's about being useful.
Yes. In a social context, this is the ability of a society to turn inward, to reflect, to analyze, to educate, to know oneself. It is the intellectual and functional capacity of a community.
So the ionic column is our schools, our universities, our scientific research, our functional economy.
Right.
But then we reach the third pillar, the Corinthian column.
The Corinthian is highly ornate, adorned with intricate carved acanthus leaves. It represents venustas, elegance and beauty.
And socially, this is where the metaphor becomes incredibly potent. How does beauty translate into a social structure?
The social translation of the Corinthian column is tolerance. It is good relations. It is the ability of diverse, independent, completely different people to harmonize with one another without destroying each other.
Let's debate this for a second. If you're building a city and you have your Doric strength, your laws and military, and your ionic functionality, your schools and hospitals, but you entirely skip the Corinthian column of empathy and aesthetic harmony, what do you have?
You have a society that technically survives, but it is a concrete bunker. You have a brutal, mechanistic society where people are treated as cogs in a machine.
That sounds miserable.
Vitruvius's fundamental point is that without venustas, without beauty and tolerance, a building might technically stand up, but it won't be a place anyone actually wants to inhabit.
True beauty in society, much like a well-designed building, occurs when independent elements come together to form a coherent, harmonious whole.
Exactly. Without the Corinthian column, you survive, but you don't thrive.
And this proves the radical premise we started with. Beauty isn't just about looking good in a superficial way. It's about acting right. It's the aesthetics of how we live together.
Which brings us to a massive historical collision of concepts, the intersection of the beautiful and the good.
For centuries, philosophers have desperately tried to separate the beautiful, which they say belongs to aesthetics, from the good, which belongs to ethics. They want clean, neat categories.
Yes, but as we see in the architecture of society, the moment you leave the theoretical textbook and enter real life, these two concepts are hopelessly intertwined.
You can't neatly untangle them. To illustrate the mechanics of how beauty and goodness interact, we can look at the history of painting. Specifically, the Italian painter Giotto, who was breaking out of the Middle Ages.
Giotto is the perfect case study. If we look at art from the Middle Ages, prior to Giotto, it was heavily abstract and dogmatic.
When you say abstract and dogmatic, what did that actually look like to a regular person walking into a church in the 13th century?
It looked flat and distant. The figures were painted against solid gold backgrounds, lacking any real gravity or human emotion. They weren't meant to look like real people.
What were they then?
They were transcendent religious symbols, avatars of divine concepts designed to instruct, not to evoke empathy.
But Giotto changes the game. He brings the divine crashing down to earth.
He does. In his famous frescoes, like the Lamentation of Christ, Giotto makes the holy deeply emotional by giving it earthly, physical, beautiful representation.
How so?
The grief over the death of Christ isn't just a theological symbol in Giotto's painting. It is the raw, visceral agony of a human mother. It is the silent, heavy grief of real human friends.
Giotto showed that the moral, the divine, and the good achieve their absolute greatest power when they're expressed through recognizable sensory beauty.
Yes. Which leads to this incredible quote from the French novelist Honoré de Balzac. "The true is the beautiful well-dressed."
The true is the beautiful well-dressed. That is such a vivid image. You cannot make a healthy aesthetic or moral judgment without the other. Finding beauty actually requires the consciousness to distinguish good from bad, right from wrong.
If we synthesize this, the ultimate purpose of pursuing beauty must align with goodness. A society that chases pure aesthetics, pure visual pleasure, while abandoning ethics becomes hollow, becomes decadent, cruel, and eventually collapses.
But I have to pose a really tricky question to you here, because this is where the rubber meets the road.
Go for it.
If the beautiful and the good are so tightly tied together, how do we explain art created by terrible people? Or more importantly, how do we explain things that are visually stunning but morally destructive?
Like propaganda.
Exactly. Think of infamous propaganda films from the 1930s. Some of them are considered cinematic masterpieces of lighting and pacing, but they were used to push horrific, evil ideologies.
That is the dark side of aesthetics. And it is exactly why the marriage of ethics and aesthetics is a conscious discipline, not an automatic guarantee.
How does that work?
Propaganda uses the mechanics of beauty. Sircello's vividness, Dewey's unity, Kant's emotional awe to hijack our nervous system, entirely bypassing our rational ethics. Beauty is a force multiplier.
Ah, a force multiplier. That explains Balzac's warning. The true is the beautiful, well-dressed. Yeah. Truth needs beauty to be palatable, to be invited into our minds. But a lie can put on the exact same dress. The dress itself, the beauty, is powerful. But if we don't have the ethical ionic column to look beneath the dress, we get fooled by the aesthetic illusion. We need the moral consciousness to see what is actually wearing the clothes.
Exactly. Beauty amplifies whatever truth or lie it is attached to, which is why the final section of our conversation today is so crucial.
Right.
If beauty is this powerful, relational, architectural force multiplier, how do we wield it responsibly? How do we actually do this? How do we dress the truth in beauty in our everyday lives?
We need a roadmap. We need applied aesthetics.
We can see exactly how aesthetics moves from an intellectual luxury to an active motor for social change by examining real-world grassroots organizations. For example, modern health and education volunteer associations.
A real-world example of taking philosophy off the chalkboard and putting it into the dirt.
Precisely. When these volunteer groups operate, their actions are the literal merging of Venusta's beauty and utilitas societal benefit. They are building Vitruvian architecture in civil society.
Let's look at the specific mechanisms of how they do this. First, they host children's art workshops. On the surface, a cynic might say, it's just kids making a mess with finger paint.
Sure.
But philosophically, what is actually happening? These workshops help children discover their own identity. They learn to frame their emotions, to find hope through color and form. It is the early cultivation of the aesthetic mind.
Then consider their fundraising efforts. Often, these groups will throw elaborate charity galas, perhaps a visually stunning Moulin Rouge-themed night.
Okay, another target for the cynic.
Exactly. Again, to a cynic, a gala is just a superficial party. But because this visual spectacle is designed specifically to gather resources to fund educational scholarships, it is an ethical action disguised as an aesthetic event. It is applied Venustus.
And the most striking example to me, planting trees. We talked earlier about Charles Lalo and the debate over whether nature has independent beauty or if humans create it.
Right, the infinite versus the frame.
Well, when volunteers go out and plant 10,000 saplings on a deforested hillside, they aren't just doing environmentalism. They are making an ethical and aesthetic contribution to nature's beauty. Humans are literally participating in the creation of natural beauty with an ethical intent.
The philosophy and practice here redefines beauty entirely for the modern age. Beauty is no longer just a pretty painting locked in a museum. Beauty is rational thought. Beauty is civic friendship and solidarity. It is building bridges between demographics without prejudice.
I love this framing. Beauty is the simple act of sincerely asking, "How are you, my friend?" instead of just throwing out a hollow passing greeting.
Let the mechanics of that sink in. Sincerity as an aesthetic value. When you ask someone how they are and you actually listen to the answer, you are creating a moment of relational harmony. You are building the Corinthian column.
Yeah.
Sharing knowledge, giving your time, leaving a lasting positive mark on the world. These are framed not just as good deeds, but as beautiful deeds.
This totally changes how I view community service. A charity gala, a tree planting drive, asking a neighbor how they are. It isn't just fundraising or politeness. It is the literal, physical manifestation of aesthetic philosophy. It's applied beauty.
It really is.
We started this hour with Plato, looking up at the distant, untouchable cosmic ideals of perfection, and we land on a volunteer kneeling in the dirt, planting a tree. Beauty is an action.
It truly brings our entire journey full circle. We've seen today that beauty is not a luxury. It is an existential requirement for a functioning society.
Definitely.
Whether you lean toward Pythagoras and believe beauty is an objective math equation of the universe, or you agree with Kant that it's a subjective thrill that forces us to seek universal agreement, or you side with Nehamas that beauty is a social glue and a vulnerable promise of happiness. The ultimate purpose of beauty is functional.
It has a job to do.
Yes, it helps us overcome our isolated human limits, connect with one another, and make the physical and social world a place we actually want to live in.
It is the harmony of the Vitruvian columns applied to human empathy.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this massive deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on. We talked about Nehamas saying beauty is a promise of happiness that requires us to take a risk and be vulnerable.
Right.
And we talked about how nature's infinite beauty lies in its undefined, blurry borders, the chaotic transition zone of the coastline.
Yes.
If true beauty requires risk, vulnerability, and undefined edges, what happens when we try to completely sanitize, curate, and control every single inch of our modern lives? With our heavily filtered photos, our predictable algorithmic feeds, and our perfectly scheduled risk-free days. Are we systematically editing out the very friction and risk that allows true beauty to exist in the first place?
That is a haunting question.
Don't forget to follow us and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes and never miss a step in this odyssey of thought. Until next time, keep questioning.